We do have a lot to cover, as you have all noted. So let me pray, and then we'll dive in. Gracious Father, thank you for this morning. What a beautiful day to be able to gather together, to worship you, to praise you for just your power and your majesty. And Father, as we're going to be looking at Leviticus and just flying through quickly this book, Lord, just pray that nevertheless we would see your design through this. We'd see how you have worked through history to point us to Christ, and see how in Leviticus we can learn not just about your holiness and your power, but also about your grace in the way that you reach out to us and give us a way to be right with you. So, Father, help us in this effort. Help us this morning to learn and to see the goodness in your word. And we trust that we will be blessed by it. And we pray all of this in Jesus' name. Amen. Okay, so we're continuing on in our series where we're going to be doing an overview of each book of the Bible. We're working through the first 5 books of the Bible. Obviously, it's known as the Pentateuch. It's the 5 scrolls is how that's typically known. And we have gone through Genesis, we've gone through Exodus, and now we are at Leviticus. So just kind of be honest, how many have found, when reading Leviticus, for it to be a very challenging book? Yeah, I mean, my hand is up. It's a challenging book. We have these long lists of things like rules and regulations, all these things about clean and unclean, and we're not sure what all that's about. Is that the same as being holy versus not being holy? We've got all these holidays and festivals, and there's all this like bloody ritual sacrifice, which is, kind of off-putting as well. And honestly, it's hard to grasp, right, in our 21st century American context, right? We're reading some literature that was written in the late Bronze Age. This is how old this text is. It is immensely, immensely old. We're talking over 3,000 years old, this text. So when we're reading something like this, there's a lot that we have to, there's a lot of barriers that we have to get through to be able to understand what is going on. And so, at first blush, also like in our Christian context, we read all these rules and people are dying because they're not following the rules, and animals are being slaughtered on a daily basis. And if we're not thinking about this critically, it just seems like there's not a lot about grace in the book of Leviticus, at least at first when we first look at it. And so as Christians, we can struggle to understand how Leviticus can help us, how it can help us to grow in our understanding of the Lord. And so it's good to be able to go through this and kind of slow down and study it a little bit and break it down into what its themes are, its purposes, what is the theological intent behind Leviticus. And hopefully by the end of this lesson here, we'll have gotten through some of that. So the central dilemma of Leviticus. If you recall, at the end of Exodus, they finish building the tabernacle being what? God's holy place. What is the tabernacle? It's a tent, right? And it is the place where God would come down to meet his people. And so it is also called the tent of meeting. The tent of meeting. It is the same thing as the tabernacle. And we have a problem at the end of Exodus. So Exodus chapter 40, verse 34, they're done setting up the tabernacle. Then the cloud, this is verse 34, the cloud covered the tent of meeting, and the glory of the Lord filled their tabernacle. That is great. That is excellent. This is amazing. The Lord has come down. He's going to be with the people in the center of the camp. But verse 35, and Moses was not able to enter into the tent of meeting because the cloud had settled on it. So we have a problem at the end of Exodus. The Lord has come down to the tent of meeting, and Moses cannot go in there to do the meeting. So we cannot fulfill the purpose of the tent of meeting because they can't meet there. Something is wrong. Why do you guys think that Moses was unable to go into the tent of meeting? He's been talking with the Lord all through Exodus, right? He was up on the mountain. The Lord showed his glory to Moses. Why all of a sudden is Moses now unable to go into the tent of meeting? This is kind of a tough one. You have to think critically, especially about what the events of Exodus were. Well, he couldn't go into the promised land because he didn't follow the Lord's instructions about getting the water out of the rock, right? So it's a similar thing, but not quite. That was an act of disobedience on Moses' part. I would not say that Moses cannot go into the tent of meeting because he was somehow disobedient to the Lord. If you recall during the golden calf incident, what did Moses say to the Lord? Let me be an atonement for the people. Take my life in place of the people. Don't destroy the people. And it seems this is where scholars kind of connect these two events. The Lord took Moses. He didn't kill Moses, but he took Moses' word at that. And as a result, Moses had all of the sin of the people, and he was unable to go into the tent of meeting. All right, then, so that's the problem. If you skip over all of Leviticus and go to Numbers chapter 1, verse 1 of Numbers. The Lord spoke to Moses in the wilderness of Sinai in the tent of meeting. So, now Moses is in there. So something has happened in the interim. At the end of Exodus, Moses cannot go in. At the end of Leviticus, Moses can go in. So what Leviticus is teaching us is how this happens. What takes place that allows Moses and Aaron to go into the tent of meeting. All right? So that is kind of the overarching purpose of Leviticus, all right, to teach us those things. Okay. Now, the central theme of Leviticus, as we'll see, is holiness. This dilemma, like Moses cannot go into the tent of meeting, we have a problem because God has come into the camp. Moses can't go into the tent of meeting. And furthermore, the people, they're a sinful people. And how does this sinful group of people interact with and host the almighty, all-powerful, all-holy God? All right? So the central theme of Leviticus is holiness, and it's trying to answer the question, how can Israel fulfill its covenant responsibility to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation? That's the question that Leviticus is going to answer. How can Israel fulfill its covenant responsibility to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation? Okay? And there's some other important themes in there, atonement and sacrifice, which we'll go into a little bit more depth from. So a quick overview of Leviticus within the Torah. There's a really fascinating kind of overarching structure that exists throughout the Pentateuch and the Torah as a whole. I've kind of laid out that diagram for you there. So in Genesis, who's ever heard of a chiasm? A few people. Who would like to volunteer to try to explain what a chiasm is? Yep. So it's an intent. It's a structural intent, right, in the text, right? Yep, that's correct. Anything to add to that? So it's like, how like in a sonnet it's A, B, B, whatever, I can't remember. A chiasm is a poetic or narrative structure that we see throughout the Bible. And the way that structure goes, if you want to assign a letter to it, you have A, B, C, back to B, back to A. And so we have these frames. And so in Western literature, what we're used to is like that. You've all learned this in English class, if you can remember, like the climax is at the end of the story, and then it just kind of ends. The main point of the text is at the end. And a lot of times in Hebrew literature, that chiasm, that main point is right smack in the middle, that point C. And that structure can exist like A, B, A, or A, B, C, D, C, B, A. And so these structures exist all throughout Hebrew literature. You find it in the Proverbs and the Psalms a lot. The Sermon on the Mount has been identified as having that chiastic structure. And scholars have also noted that the whole Pentateuch is one big, massive chiasm. Okay? So we see some of these themes and topics in Genesis: separation from the nations, blessings, seeing the land, descendants and land. We skip down to Deuteronomy, it's almost verbatim a separation of the same types of topics: separation from the nations, blessings, seeing the land, descendants and the land. If you think about the endings of these two books, the ending of Genesis, Jacob, right, he's dying, right, and he gathers his sons around him and he delivers a speech. And in that speech he's talking about like what's going to happen to his sons in the future. What are the blessings? What does he anticipate for his sons? At the end of Deuteronomy, we have the exact same thing. We have Moses, he's dying, he gathers the sons of Israel around him, and he starts delivering a speech. And in fact, if you read it carefully, when Moses is talking to the sons of Israel, some of the blessings that he's laying out are verbatim the exact same things that Jacob described at the end of Genesis. And then, if you're looking at this framing device, we have Genesis and Deuteronomy, which correspond together, and then we have this inner triad of Exodus, Leviticus, and Numbers. So Exodus, we have desert wandering, apostasy and plague, Pharaoh and the magicians, and this theme about the firstborn and the Levites. Numbers, same themes: desert wandering, apostasy and plague. We have Balak and Balaam, I don't know how to say that, Balaam, firstborn and Levites. And so if that's true, you know, if Exodus, for instance, begins with the people enslaved in Egypt, then they leave Egypt, they go through the wilderness, and then at the end they're parked at the bottom of Mount Sinai. Numbers, they're still parked at Mount Sinai. What do? They start wandering through the desert. And we have very similar events happening in Exodus. The people are grumbling in the desert. Moses strikes the rock and water comes out, and God's providing them with manna. In Numbers, we have at the exact same location, Meribah, Moses strikes the rock and water comes out, and because the people are grumbling. In the first instance, it was an act of obedience on Moses' part. It was a success. In the second, obviously, Moses was not doing things the way that God had commanded him, and that was a pretty bad failure on Moses' part. But nevertheless, same event. So the whole point of this is to demonstrate if there's this structure that exists within the Pentateuch, what is at the heart of the Pentateuch? Leviticus. It is at the very heart of the Pentateuch. And that tells us that there are some important things to be learned from Leviticus. And, it's kind of funny. I actually read that when in ancient Israel, when children would start learning Scripture, they did not start with Genesis. They started with Leviticus. They would actually start learning Leviticus before they would go back and learn Genesis, because Leviticus is the heart of the Pentateuch. All right, so there's that. I just wanted to explain that to you so you all could see how Leviticus fits within the broader structure of the Torah as a whole. Now, looking at Leviticus itself, I would argue there's different ways, just like how Zach kind of laid out different ways to outline Exodus, and there's different ways that scholars have outlined Leviticus. Some folks turn it into a 4-part structure. They put like the first division at chapter 7. What I've laid out for us today is actually a 3-part outline. I'm pretty convinced that there's really 3 distinct movements within Leviticus. The first part of that outline in Leviticus is chapters 1 through 10, where we see 2 kind of components, subcomponents there, the offerings that we'll go through and the different sacrifices that the people have to do. And then chapters 8 through 10 is the establishment and the ordination of the priesthood of Aaron. And there's a Crazy little event that happens in chapter 10. By the end of chapter 10, we see that first kind of movement come to a close, and that launches us into the second movement, which is chapters 11 through 16. And that is capped off with what we call the Day of Atonement in chapter 16. We'll take a look at that. And then chapter 17 through the end of the book, we have more descriptions of how the people are to live as a holy people before the Lord. And that itself is kind of a chiastic structure as well. Chapters 1 through 10 is a setting up of how the people are to live and operate as a holy people with the Lord. Chapters 17 through the end, also a description of how the people are to live before the Lord. And right smack in the middle there, at the heart of Leviticus, is some chapters about what it means to be clean and unclean, and this very special event called the Day of Atonement. So we're going to look at those things, okay? All right, so I've laid out for you in your handout that simple outline of Leviticus, and the way we're going to kind of work our way through this is we're going to walk through more of the expanded outline of Leviticus. And so in your handout, I have this expanded outline. We're going to pause every once in a while to go back to the ending of the packet to look at some things at a little bit more depth as we walk through this outline. And we'll see, depending on how much time we have, we might have to cut short at the end, but that's okay. As long as we get through at least the Day of Atonement, we'll be doing all right. Okay, so Leviticus. It's a challenging book. When you start breaking it down and you understand the purpose of what's going on here, it actually becomes a little bit more simple, all right? The first 7 chapters of Leviticus is this description of how the people are to live as a holy people before the Lord, right? So we have this problem at the end of Exodus. We can't go into the tent of meeting. We don't know what the people are doing. And so Moses starts giving the people instructions about, okay, what are we going to do about this? What do we need to do? So we have, at the opening of Leviticus, a description of these different sacrifices or offerings, all right? So let's take a look at these real briefly. We have laws of offering, and these laws in this section are listed twice. So we've got a group of 5 offerings as they pertain to lay people. And then we have the list basically repeated, but now the laws, it's the same offerings, but as they pertain to the priests. Okay, so that's all it is. So when you're reading Leviticus and your eyes start to glaze over and you're getting sleepy because you're trying to read these things, just understand we've got 2 lists, and they're the exact same lists, the same offerings. The first time they go through it, it's for the people. The second time they go through it, it's for the priests. And we kind of have to read both to get all the details for how these things are to go through. So let's work through this just briefly. The burnt offering. Why is it called the burnt offering? Because you burn it. Yes. Do you burn all of it or some of it? All of it. So the burnt offering is called the burnt offering. That's an easy way to remember. It's the burnt offering because they burn all of it. And a lot of these, the priests are able to hold back a portion of the sacrifice for themselves so that they can eat it. And they're actually commanded to do that. The burnt offering is different. They burn this to ashes. This thing is totally consumed. There's no purposes that are left over. Verses 3, this is chapter 1. If his offering is a burnt offering from the herd, he shall offer a male without blemish. It has to be without blemish. He shall bring it to the entrance of the tent of meeting, that he may be accepted before the Lord. He shall lay his hand on the head of the burnt offering, and it shall be accepted for him to make atonement for him. So there you have the purpose of the burnt offering. It is to make atonement for the sins of the person that is offering the animal. Now, why do we burn it? What's happening? It's being consumed. And what is happening to the animal as it's being burned? This is not a trick question. It's dying, for it's definitely dying. It is going up to the Lord in the smoke, right? The aroma is going up to the Lord. It's a sacrifice to the Lord. And all these things that are being burned, the symbolism that exists there is that it is going up to the Lord through the smoke. Okay? The grain offering is likely for those who could not afford to bring like a full animal or meat, but it was that grain offering, despite being an alternative for people that might not be able to afford to bring meat, was not fully consumed by fire. The priests were allowed to retain some of it for themselves, had to be unleavened. I think they mix a little bit of salt in there, again, to create that pleasing aroma up to the Lord. The peace offering, if you read both sections on that, is kind of related to vows or celebrations for like a family or something along those lines. And this is actually the only instance where the person bringing the offering gets to eat a portion of it for himself as well. Most of the time, they don't get any portion of it, but the peace offering they do. The sin offering, which we see here, you would think would be like the burnt offering, right? It's the sin offering, so it's for my sins. But what the sin offering is for unintentional sins. How many people have unintentionally sinned before? That room was honest. This side of the room was not. We've all committed unintentional sins before. That's what the sin offering was for. Like, I probably have sinned in a way that I don't even know. I'm sure I have. And I don't want to be living in a state of sin before the Lord, and so I'm going to bring a sin offering, and that's going to cover all of those unintended, unintentional, or accidental sins. And then we have the guilt offering. It's kind of similar to the sin offering, but basically it is for mistaken or unintentional sins as they relate to a vow. So one example, if you're familiar with what a Nazirite is, it's somebody that had made a vow before the Lord in certain ways, that they would live their life in a certain way in obedience to the Lord. They had taken a vow. They have to remain in a clean state, which we'll talk about in a minute. But what happens if you have made this vow before the Lord and you accidentally come into contact with a dead body? Your vow has been broken, but you didn't mean to do that. That's what a guilt offering is for. It's to correct that situation. All right, so that's all chapters 1 through 7 are, is a listing of these different offerings. And again, when we have to go back, what is the point of all of these things? It's difficult for us to understand these things. We need to go back to the central dilemma that Leviticus is trying to solve. How does Israel live as a community before the Lord? This is part of it, right? Because they have to deal with their sin in a certain way that allows them to be in proximity to the Lord. And speaking of proximity, right? So in Leviticus, this is a really important point. Holiness is often related to proximity. We don't oftentimes think about holiness that way in our Christian context, but holiness, especially in the context of Leviticus, there's this component of proximity to the Lord. So that I came across this is not my original analogy, but I came across this great analogy, right? Think about the sun, the star. We need the sun to live, right? The sun allows food to grow in the earth. Without the sun, we die. The sun gives us life. But the sun is also what? Extremely dangerous. If we were to fly a rocket ship to the sun, we would eventually get incinerated, right? We would just poof, get turned into dust or space dust, whatever. But even here, like if I go out into the desert and I, don't have a shirt on and I'm just out there in the sun, what's going to happen to me? I'm going to turn into a lobster. I'm going to get burned by the sun. So the sun is good. It gives us life. But the sun is also really dangerous. So if I want to go outside and be in proximity to the sun, I got to do certain things. I have to modify myself. I have to put on clothes. I have to wear sunscreen. I got to maybe have a sunshade or something like that. Put a hat on because these bald spots are only getting bigger. I have to modify myself to do that. And so this is exactly what's happening to the Israelites here. They can't just be in the presence of the Lord without modifying themselves in some kind of way. They have to change themselves because the Lord is good, but the Lord is also dangerous, right? C.S. Lewis tried to kind of capture this idea with the lion Aslan. Remember that scene for those who've read the books? Lucy is looking at the lion and she asks the beaver, is he dangerous? And the beaver is like, it's a lion. Of course, he's dangerous. But the beaver says, he's also good. And that is the exact same way. So that's what's going on here. The Israelites have to figure out how to modify themselves, how to act, to be in proximity to the Lord. Even Aaron, who's going to be the priest, he has to wear certain clothes to go into the tent of meeting. He can't just walk in there wearing, his Saturday morning scrubs. He's got to put on the full regalia of the official priestly robes. So even he has to wear certain clothes, and it gets pretty crazy, but they're modifying themselves so that they can be in proximity to the Lord. And the closer you get to the Lord, the more modification you need, to the point where Aaron is the one that has to end up, and the subsequent priests, they're the ones that have to modify themselves the most with all the things that they've got to do. So hopefully that helps you guys kind of grasp what's going on here. All right, so let's look at, just to close out this section here, let's look at a little bit about, flip over in Leviticus to chapter 8. We're still in the first big movement of Leviticus. We've gone through this list of different offerings and sacrifices and whatnot. And chapter 8, here we have the consecration and ordination of Aaron and his sons. So we're not going to read this full chapter, but basically Moses is like, he's gathering up all the people of the camp. He's like, come over here, we're going to do this thing. And Aaron and his sons have to go through all of these different rituals to make themselves ready. They have to be outside the tent for 7 days. This is a multi-day event. It's pretty serious. And then in chapter 9, so they go through all this whole thing. In chapter 9, if you want to think about that dilemma, right? Moses cannot go into the tent of meeting. What are we going to do about it? Well, they've been moving towards a solution. They're getting Aaron ready so that he can go into the tent of meeting, and chapter 9 is the big climax of this story. Aaron is going to start offering a sacrifice, and we're going to have to find out, is the Lord going to accept Aaron's sacrifice? Aaron was the guy, if you recall, that led the people in building the golden calf, and it resulted in 3,000 people getting slaughtered that day. If I did something and it caused 3,000 people to die, put me in the group, please. I don't want to have to carry that guilt. Aaron has messed up a lot. His leadership hasn't been great, and we're going to find out if all of this has been worth it. So they do that. Aaron goes through, he sacrifices the animals. And verse 22 of chapter 9, then Aaron lifted up his hands toward the people and blessed them, and he came down from offering the sin offering and the burnt offering and the peace offerings. And Moses and Aaron went into the tent of meeting, and when they came out, they blessed the people, and the glory of the Lord appeared to all the people. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed the burnt offering and the pieces of fat on the altar. And when all the people saw it, they shouted and fell on their faces. Hooray! We did it, guys. High five. Let's pack the bags up. Let's go home. We did it, right? Is that the end of the story? Okay, so if the text ended right there, we would expect, all right, we did it. The program is up and running. We're done. As we so often see in Scripture, the moment people do something great, there's also like a big fall that comes in right after that. All right, so what happens? Chapter 10. Now Nadab and Abihu, the sons of Aaron, these are Aaron's oldest two boys, they're also supposed to be priests. Each took his censer, which is like a little container that would hold a piece of burning coal in it. Each took his censer and put fire in it and laid incense on it, and they offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, which he had not commanded them. And fire came out from before the Lord and consumed them, and they died before the Lord. So they did something wrong. They offered unauthorized fire before the Lord, and just like fire came out and consumed the sacrifice, like 2 sentences ago, fire came out and consumed Aaron's sons. It's like the exact same language that gets used in the text. The image I have here is like Luke Skywalker's parents in A New Hope. Like they're just burned to like bones. And so then verse 3, Moses said to Aaron, "This is what the Lord has said. Among those who are near me," there's that proximity thing, "those who are near me, I will be sanctified. And before all the people, I will be glorified." And Aaron held his peace. Like Aaron, try to put yourself in his shoes. He's probably shocked. He's probably just like totally dazed. Like, what has just happened? This was our big moment of victory. This was the moment of celebration. And his sons have done something incorrect. They disobeyed the Lord. They dishonored the Lord. They sinned, and their bodies were consumed by fire from the Lord. So we went from a very high to a very, very low in like a matter of like 2 sentences. So this is a very tragic event, obviously for Aaron, for the people, for Moses. But we have a problem, because where are Aaron's sons? Where are their bodies right now? Where's the bodies? Yeah, so Moses called Mishael and Elzaphan, the sons of Uzziel, the uncle of Aaron, and said to them, "Come near, carry your brothers away from the front of the sanctuary. They are at the heart of God's holy place. We have dead bodies with carcasses right now, which represent uncleanness, which represent death and all this stuff. And God's abode, his place where he was supposed to reside with the people, has been defiled at this point. And it is what you would call unclean. All right, so this is an unmitigated disaster. Aaron's sons, who are supposed to be priests, are now dead. They've dishonored the Lord, and we have dead bodies in the sanctuary. Okay, this is bad. So that's why I see this as kind of like the ending of that first part of Leviticus. So we can divide it into 3 components. And then, as we'll see, we get into this next section, which is a long list of rules and regulations regarding cleanness and uncleanness, which is very pertinent because we have to do something about the uncleanness of the sanctuary. Okay, so that is there. Before we move on, in your packets, see how did I lay this out? Page 3. I want to talk about holiness, and I want to talk about how this relates to proximity to the Lord, and how holiness and sin and cleanness and uncleanness, how all these things kind of fit together. All right, so I've already mentioned that in Leviticus, an important concept regarding holiness is proximity to God, okay? Now, in Leviticus, the binary opposite of holiness what we often think is like sin or evil or something like that. Actually, in Leviticus, the binary opposite of holiness is common. Things are put into two different categories: holy category, common category. Okay? And then common is then subdivided into two categories there. So then within the common category, we got two different divisions. We've got things that are clean and things that are unclean. So this little diagram here shows you what this means. And when I say clean or unclean, I'm talking like a ritual cleanness or a ritual uncleanness. If you are unclean, you cannot come into proximity to the Lord. If you are clean but not holy, you can get closer, but you can't go all the way. Okay, so if we look, holy things on the left there, they're holy, they've been sanctified, they've been covered with blood and all that good stuff. If they are profaned in any way, they immediately become common and perhaps even unclean. You can go straight from holy all the way down to unclean like that if some condition were met. Profane is a weird word. I think in a contemporary way of using that word, it has like this bad connotation to it, like that he profaned that thing. But actually, the word historically just means to make common, to make something common. That's all profane means. The King James Version, if you have that version of the Bible, uses the word profane a lot. They kind of don't use that word anymore in more contemporary translations because the connotations aren't correct. So things can be profaned and they move into common. In the common category, something that is clean can be sanctified and it can move into the holy category. Something that is clean and something happens to pollute it, like it comes into contact with a dead body. There's other conditions in chapters 11 through 15 that we'll see that could cause something to become unclean, and it moves down into that category. Now, sin always makes something unclean. Sin always makes something unclean. If you have sin and you haven't done something about it, like you brought an animal to be sacrificed or something, you are unclean. You cannot go near the Lord. However, some things can cause you to become unclean, ritually unclean, that are not sinful. Women have it pretty tough. They're having their monthly cycles or they give childbirth. Both those things cause you to become unclean. You have to do something to purify yourself. There's a certain amount of days that you have to go through. But men also can have certain things that can cause them to become unclean. Skin diseases can do that. Other things. So there's, we won't go through all of them, but chapters 11 through 15 all list out these things. And so that just because you are unclean doesn't mean that you have sinned necessarily. But you do have to do the things that make you ritually clean again so that you can approach the center of the camp, go towards the tabernacle. Does that make sense? It's kind of complicated. Hopefully that helps you. I have these other things down here where there's the divisions of proximity. So for instance, like the closer you get to the Lord, the more holy you have to be. So like priests are going to be the closest to the Lord. Then we have the nation of Israel. They're the people of the Lord. And then all the Gentiles are on the outside of that. That's us, dirty Gentiles. Then animals, if you were to read through there's divisions of cleanness and uncleanness for animals. Some animals are clean, some animals are not. And that's what drives these dietary restrictions that the Israelites have. They can't eat unclean animals because if they do, they themselves become unclean. So we've got animals that are set aside for sacrifice. Those are the ones without blemish. Those are the best animals. Then we have clean animals, and then we have unclean animals. And even spaces, right? You have the wilderness on the outside of the camp. Then you have the camp. Then you have the tabernacle. And even the tabernacle itself has divisions of proximity to the Lord. We got the outer courtyard. Then you've got the holy place, which is the inner portion of the tent with like the lampstand and the table. And then you have, within that, there's a curtain. You have what was called the Holy of Holies, or the most holy place. And that's actually where the Ark of the Covenant is. You've got the seat of, what's the seat called? The mercy seat, thank you. I just totally lost it. You have the mercy seat, which is just the lid of the Ark of the Covenant. That's all it is. The mercy seat is the lid. So you've got all these divisions of proximity to the Lord, and the closer you get to the Lord, the more holy you have to be. And as that upper chart shows, to make something able to move closer to the Lord, you have to cover it in blood. That's what sacrifice is. And so they're just slopping blood all over this stuff, just like slinging it. That was the effect I wanted. It's gross. Noel's just like, ugh. Yeah, they're like, the text is like, he flicks his finger like 7 times. But, it's also talking about like full basins of blood. There's a lot of blood going on with these animals. And they have to do that because that's what atones for these things. And the people need atonement, but the equipment, like the table and the altar, that all needs to be atoned for as well, because of that polluting effect of cleanness and uncleanness. Just the fact that, like, for instance, the altar, it's in the midst of a sinful group of people. It becomes polluted, and so it also needs atonement. So they got to cover it in blood. And the Ark of the Covenant has to be covered in blood on the Day of Atonement. They got to cover this stuff because it's in proximity to these people, and there's like this like invisible polluting effect that this sin has on all this stuff, and so they got to like slop blood all over it. All right. So moving on. Yeah. We got these laws of cleanness and uncleanness. That's what all this is describing. And we have chapter 16, following the events of Aaron's sons getting burnt to a crisp. We have, now we got to deal with, by the way, just as a quick nugget, there's this really weird, seemingly out of place law in chapter 10 that is like, it's just narrative, right? It's the story of how these boys messed up. They were full-grown men, but they messed up and they were killed. And it's the only time God speaks directly to Aaron. That never happens, ever, in the Pentateuch, except for this one little verse in chapter 10 where God tells Aaron, when you do this, you're not allowed to drink alcohol. And I think it's pretty convincing. It's very likely that that Nadab and Abihu were drunk when they did this, and it caused them, people get drunk, they make poor choices. And they thought they could do things their own way, not follow the rules of the Lord. And that's what happened. Maybe it's a little bit of conjecture, but it is seemingly out of place. There's that. So the Day of Atonement, chapter 16. They've been listing out these laws of cleanness and uncleanness, and chapter 16 is kind of like the ending of this whole section. And really, in my opinion, since if I'm arguing that there's this chiastic structure in Leviticus, and chapters 11 through 16 is the central portion of Leviticus, and chapter 16 represents the climax moment of this middle section, then what we are looking at here is the very heart of the entire Pentateuch. This is like the middle, the center of the center of the center of the center of the Pentateuch. Chapter 16, the Day of Atonement. All right, so let's look at this. Well, first of all, what is atonement? I don't want to assume that everybody just has this like crisp understanding of what atonement is. It's actually kind of difficult to find a good, crisp, succinct definition of atonement. I was like looking through all these different like books and commentaries, and like they were all just all over the place, and it was kind of frustrating. In a secular definition, it really just means reconciliation or satisfaction or reparation for a wrong or some kind of broken relationship. That's all it really means, is that you're just making something right that is wrong. It could even mean like paying a debt, like I owe somebody some money, I have to make atonement, and I have to give them the money that I owe them, right? That's kind of like a secular meaning for it. This biblical definition that I've offered you here, this is me kind of taking different things from different things I read, trying to piece together a really good one. So this is not like ultra precise. You can critique me privately later, but this is the way I've laid it out. To cover or take away, usually in the context of sacrifice. So in biblical terms, there's always sacrifice tied to the act of atonement. Atonement is the covering of sin as a result of an innocent individual taking upon himself the penalty that is due, though not the guilt of, the sinner, that results in reconciliation between two parties. Fair enough? I'm looking at Zach like I'm not committing blasphemy here. So that's like when you see atonement actually is not, that word itself is not really used very often in the New Testament. The concept of atonement is all over the New Testament. The word atonement is not used very often in the New Testament, but the word atonement is used, like it's all over the Old Testament, especially the Pentateuch. So we do need to understand what's going on there. Some other related words or synonyms that we might be familiar with is like reconciliation, ransom, cover, pardon. There's this word expiation, which is like to like remove, wipe out. So where did my Bible go? Let's take a look at chapter 16. The Day of Atonement. The Lord spoke to Moses after the death of the two sons of Aaron. So in the narrative text, it's the very same day. No time has moved. Okay, same day that those two sons have died. When they drew near before the Lord and died, and the Lord said to Moses, "Tell Aaron your brother not to come at any time into the holy place inside the veil before the mercy seat that is on the ark, so that he may not die. For I will appear in the cloud over the mercy seat," over the ark of the covenant in the most holy of holies. "But in this way Aaron shall come into the holy place." So here we're about to get a description of what Aaron is supposed to do on the Day of Atonement. "With a bull from the herd for a sin offering and a ram for a burnt offering, he shall put on the holy linen coat, and he shall have the linen undergarment on his body, and he shall tie the linen sash around his waist and wear the linen turban. These are the holy garments. He shall bathe his body in water and then put them on. And he shall take from the congregation of the people of Israel 2 male goats for a sin offering and 1 ram for a burnt offering." Verse 6, "Aaron shall offer the bull as a sin offering for himself, and shall make atonement for himself and for his house. Then he shall take the 2 goats and set them before the Lord at the entrance of the tent of meeting. And Aaron shall cast lots over the 2 goats, one for the Lord and the other lot for Azazel." That's confusing. We'll have to look at that. "And Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord and use it as a sin offering." Why a lot? What's a lot? Casting lots. What does that mean? Yeah, like ancient Near Eastern dice. That's what they're doing. Whatever it looks like, they're doing that. Why? Why is there a lot that they have to like cast? What is the point of that? It's kind of. Thank you, Jamie. Spot on. It's the Lord choosing. He's got 2 options here, right? These are 2 goats without blemish. Aaron's not the one that gets to decide which goat is sacrificed and which goat goes out to the wilderness. It's the Lord that gets to choose that. And so the way that they let the Lord choose which goat is sacrificed is by casting this lot, and the Lord chooses, okay? We'll figure out what this whole Azazel thing is here. Funny thing is, we're not going to solve that today because scholars don't even know what Azazel is, but there's some theories. Who's got a KJV or a King James Version or NASB? Anybody? Not the ESV. You got, what do you got? Yours has scapegoat. Can you read that sentence for us, please?
Yeah. Aaron shall cast lots for the two goats, one lot for the Lord and the other lot for the scapegoat.
One lot for the Lord and one lot for the scapegoat? Why not one lot? Why does it say for the scapegoat? That's kind of interesting. So the grammar is a little confusing there. And then for some reason, other interpreters have decided, or translators have not chosen to use the word scapegoat, which just means the escape goat, the goat that escapes. They've chosen to transliterate the Hebrew word into some English version, and that comes out as Azazel. Azazel. All right, so let's just move on. We'll come back to Azazel in a minute. And Aaron shall present the goat on which the lot fell for the Lord and use it as a sin offering. Verse 10. But the goat on which the lot fell for Azazel shall be presented alive before the Lord to make atonement over it, that it may be sent away into the wilderness to Azazel. Aaron shall present the bull as a sin offering for himself, and he shall make atonement for himself and for his house. He shall kill the bull as a sin offering for himself, and he shall take a censer full of coals of fire from the altar before the Lord, and 2 handfuls of sweet incense beaten small, and he shall bring it inside the veil and put the incense on the fire before the Lord. The cloud of the incense may cover the mercy seat that is over the testimony, so that he does not die. So what is going on here? Aaron is about to enter into the Holy of Holies. That means the curtain is opened up. He still cannot just go in there. He's got to burn this incense to create basically a screen of smoke. It kind of obscures the Lord to Aaron's eyes. Otherwise, he'll die, right? In the interest of time, I wanted to read the full chapter. We're not going to because we don't have the time for it. But let's just kind of walk through this summary here of what's going on. I kind of identify like 10 things, right? So first, the priest has to bathe. He puts on these white linens. These, like, normally his robes are like super ornate, colorful, gold and purple and things like that. He's just wearing some simple white linen robes, really to express humility and repentance before the Lord. Then he offers a bull as a sin offering for himself and the other priests. They cast lots for the 2 goats. He fills the tent up with incense to screen the altar. If we were to continue reading, he then takes the blood from the bull and he flings it on the mercy seat, which is the lid of the Ark of the Covenant, and on the floor before the Ark of the Covenant. So he's just spreading blood all over the place. Then he goes back outside of the tent to retrieve the goat that was set aside for the sin offering, the one that the Lord chose by lot. He sacrifices it, goes back into the tent of meeting, covers everything with blood with that goat. And then, let's see, then he leaves the tent with that blood. He covers the altar with all this blood. Then he gets what we'll call the scapegoat. He grabs that goat. As another man that has prepared himself, the priest places both hands on the head of that goat. He confesses all of Israel's sins onto the head of this goat, symbolically like transferring all of the sins of the community onto that goat. And then he sends that goat out into the wilderness. So that other guy that was just ready, he kind of leads that goat out of the camp and into the wilderness. And the goat is never actually killed. The goat is just released into the wilderness, and it is never allowed. It's banished. It's exiled. Kind of like symbolically bringing the sins of the people into the wilderness. Then the priest, step 9, bathes again. He puts his priestly robes back on. He offers 2 more burnt offerings, so lots of dead animals here. Sacrifices 2 more, one for himself and then one for the people. And then the carcasses of the original bull and the original goat that were used for the original sacrifice, those carcasses are brought outside the camp and they are burned to ash. And that is the Day of Atonement. That is the full sequence of events. what is the point of the Day of Atonement? The point here is that the normal sacrifices that we read about in verses 1 through, or chapters 1 through 7, for in whatever way, they're not actually sufficient to deal with the sins of the people in the way that it needs to be done. And so once a year, they have to have this big moment called the Day of Atonement. And this is what like totally resets everything, if you will, for the people for a full year. And then the next year, they have to do it all over again. And this is kind of the cycle that they go through. This is literally the most holy day for the Israelite community, this day right here. In terms of Azazel, it could just mean like a location, someplace outside the camp, possible. The text, there's a lot of things here that point to some different things here. We'll go through this. I'm going to take 5 minutes of your time, maybe 10. Azazel, if you kind of break it down to its constituent parts, I'm not a language guy by any means, but some scholars have noted that the root kind of phrases within this word means something like strong spirit or powerful spirit. Azza is what that is, that powerful or strong, and then El is the word for spirit. So there's that. There's the parallel kind of lines that we see. Where is it in? I can't find it in the text, but one lot for the Lord and one lot for Azazel. In the language itself, there's like this very distinct parallel phrases, and so there's a connection there that scholars have noted. Verse 8, thank you. Yep, there it is. Aaron shall cast lots over the two goats, one lot for the Lord, and that's Yahweh, one lot for Yahweh, one lot for Azazel. And then it goes that all those sins, like all the garbage of Israel is just like heaped on top of this goat, and that goat is sent to Azazel. So if Azazel is a powerful spirit, some scholars have actually argued that this could very well be the serpent figure that we get from the garden. If you were to look at this whole event, the Day of Atonement, it's almost like it's ritually reenacting the priest entering back into the Garden of Eden. When Adam and Eve were banished out of the garden, where were they banished to? What direction? To the east. When Cain was banished, where was he banished to? The east. The tabernacle, when the front entrance of the tabernacle is pointing what direction? The east. So that when the priest is going towards the Holy of Holies, what direction is he walking? Back to the west. Right? He's entering into, so he's going westward. The curtains inside the tabernacle, what's on the curtains? What's stitched into the curtains? You remember? Starts with a CH. Cherub, yep, cherubim are stitched into the curtains. What's guarding the entrance to the garden in the east? Cherubim. There's all kinds of crazy connections. We could go on. The temple is set up in the exact same way. This imagery exists. It's like God is making a way for a return to Eden. He's making a way for man and God himself to be their relationship to be renewed. And so, if that's true, then the Eden narrative in chapter 3, when we have the fall, we have the serpent in there. It's possible that this Azazel figure is the satanic figure, the serpent figure from the Garden of Eden, and it's like we're taking all the sins that you caused, and we're going to shove all those sins onto that serpent. We're sending those sins of the camp back to Satan. So, just a cool little thing. All right, so that's the Day of Atonement, and that leads us into the next section. We're not going to go through that whole thing. We're out of time. But basically now we have a full another section of what does it mean to live as a community holy before the Lord. And so we get all these different different laws and regulations and things like that. So, we got the different feasts, the holy calendar, things like that. So basically, after the Day of Atonement, from a narrative perspective, we get like a whole nother section on all this stuff. It's interesting that in chapter 17, there's a note there where the people are sacrificing to goat demons. So from a narrative standpoint, we start this next section with yet another moral failure. And so there's like Moses has to command them, like, you can't do that anymore. You got to sacrifice within the camp in the way that we've laid it out. And it goes on. All right, so what is all this? What's the point of all this for us in the 21st century? What are we supposed to make of all of this thing? Well, Leviticus is part of the Torah. Torah means instruction. So Leviticus trains us to see the world in a particular way, I would argue. It trains us to see the world in categories of holiness. It trains us to understand God's character in a certain way. It also shows us that God is not to be worshipped in whatever way that we want. We have to worship the Lord in the way that he has commanded us to worship him. It should elevate our understanding and appreciation of God's character and holiness. It should help us to understand the vast separation that exists between God and man because of sin. Leviticus helps us to see that, I think, in a pretty visceral way. It should teach us about God's relationship to sin. Like, how does God view sin? He takes it pretty seriously. But furthermore, what initiative has God taken on his part to provide atonement for people? And it should help us to understand like the purpose of ritual, kind of like what we laid out there with this whole thing in the Garden of the Day of Atonement, and depicting the Garden of Eden and things like that. And I think furthermore, it just highlights God's grace, right? Do animals really take away our sin? Does the curtain really contain God's presence? Like, is that actually effective for containing God's presence from the priest? No. It's just a piece of fabric. Does the priest actually have to wear a robe to protect himself? Like, it's just fabric, right? These are symbols for something that is actually needed. Like, these point us to the reality that whatever this program is under the Levitical priests, it's not sufficient. They have to do the Day of Atonement ceremony year after year after year. It's not sufficient. So we need something more. And this is recognized even in the Old Testament. Prophets like Isaiah and Ezekiel and Hosea and others, many others, they recognized there were problems with the Levitical sacrificial system, and they needed something more. They needed a Messiah. So we are out of time. I encourage you, if you want to find out the New Testament application of all this stuff, go read Hebrews chapters 9 and 10. I was going to read that for us. We don't have time. But go home and read Hebrews chapters 9 and 10, because it tells you exactly what all this was pointing to, and what we know, of course, is Jesus Christ himself. All of those things pointed us to Jesus, and all of those things were a shadow of the real things that were to come. So there's Leviticus. Did not quite hammer through that in 1 hour, 1 hour and 10 minutes. Hopefully next time you read Leviticus, your eyes won't totally glaze over, and hopefully it will make a little bit more sense for you the next time you do that, okay? Let me say a quick word of prayer and we'll be done. Father, thank you for your word. Thank you for Leviticus. Thank you for the things that it teaches us, and thank you above all for Jesus Christ, who is the real thing, the real deal, and he is the one that has actually once and for all laid his life down as an atonement that totally reconciles us to you and totally appeases your wrath over sin, Lord, and totally fulfills your justice. And Father, one thing that is very important for us to remember is that it's because of your love that we are atoned. You do not love us because we are atoned. You love us, and because of that, we have atonement, Lord. So we thank you for your love, and we will praise you this morning for it. In Jesus' name we pray. Amen. Thanks, everyone.